Greetings from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a great state and a great place of the great USA. Welcome to our podcast series, and I am promising you that this series is going to be very enlightening, very inspirational, a lot of fun, and something that will really, I think, help you as you walk your path to holiness. This series is going to have a lot of different things that you probably have questions about, but maybe had the opportunity to ask, especially about religious life. Like, what do they do all day? Who are they? Where do they come from? What's it like when a young woman enters religious life? So stay tuned as we will discuss where sisters come from today. Welcome back to our Go LE Digital series of The Truth Will Set You Free. I am Sister Joseph Andrew Bogdanowitz, and we are coming to you from our studio in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and the mother house of our Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist. And if you've been listening to these, you have heard several of my wonderful sister stories, and you're already noticing they're all so different. Yes, because God doesn't create two of us alike. Even identical twins are so different. Did you know that? Even biologically, they're very different. But in any case, we certainly are different. We come from different backgrounds and different families and different experiences and our own individuality, which is God-given. And so our community likes to highlight the uniqueness of each sister, because in that is a different aspect of God in His love and His goodness and His beauty. And so today, I'm very happy to be able to bring with us today for you to meet and get to know Sister Maria Guadalupe Halley. Sister Maria Guadalupe, it is good to have you. Would you please, first of all, I love your name.
Thank you, Sister.
And you were the first of our sisters to get the name of Guadalupe. So you took her actual name.
Yes.
Since then, we've had several references to her and sisters that take her feast day, but they're not going to take Guadalupe because you claimed it early on, which just thrilled my heart, sister. I love Our Lady of Guadalupe, the patroness of the unborn, Mother of the Eucharist. That's pretty strong.
Yes.
And just so many things about her. But sister, first of all, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, where you were born and raised, and a little bit about your family so we get to know you.
Thank you, Sister. I'm happy to be here today. I was born on the East Coast. I was born actually in Connecticut, and we lived there till I was about 5 years old. And then we moved up to the Boston suburbs in Massachusetts, and that's where I grew up the rest of my life. I have a wonderful set of parents who are currently celebrating 50 years.
How beautiful.
Of
Congratulations,
yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Halley.
It is a great gift. And I have an older brother and a younger sister. And so I was raised in the suburbs of Boston and raised Catholic. My parents were certainly intending to pass the faith along to us. And I would say the strongest thing they did for me growing up was modeling for me the importance of Sunday Mass.
Oh, beautiful,
Sunday Mass was
sister.
Non-negotiable in our house. There was no question about it. Everything else had to take second place to Sunday Mass. And I did go through a phase as a very obnoxious teenager.
I can't imagine.
I did. And Grace works. My mother would yell at me and drag me out of bed to get me to go to Mass on Sunday morning. So
God bless your mom.
God bless her indeed. And so that example later on, when I looked back, I saw that was one of the greatest witnesses that my parents set for me. I went to public school growing up, and so my religious education was primarily through CCD.
Okay.
At the parish, once a week.
How was that?
For about an hour. There's a lot of talk about the generations after Vatican II that were not catechized well, and I fall squarely into that.
Okay.
I mean, we learned prayers. We did coloring pages. We did felt banners. These are the things I remember.
I think some of our audience will connect with you on this issue, Sister. I know.
And I do remember a couple of my CCD teachers tried to get us into the scriptures a little bit more.
Okay.
So we would pull the Bibles out during class and read different passages, different stories about Christ. But it was only once a week. And that
true.
plus Sunday Mass kept me in the bounds of the church, but I didn't know really what the church was teaching. Also, through my parish in high school, I got involved in CYO, and I came to love retreats. And so God was going to use that down the road and work through that.
Okay.
Because I didn't go to because I did go to public school, I didn't spend money on private school growing up. When it came time for college, I was looking at going to a Catholic university of some sort.
So you had made that decision yourself.
I did. Almost all the colleges I applied to were Catholic. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Now that's grace at work.
It is. Wow. And I mean, the faith was important in our family to a certain extent.
Okay.
You know, and I would also credit my family with that interest in Catholic education. My mom had graduated from Boston College, so that was actually my first choice.
The Jesuits.
Yes.
Okay.
And so I applied to Boston College and several other Jesuit universities and several other private Catholic colleges.
Okay.
And BC accepted me, but offered me zero in the way of financial aid.
Okay.
And for my family, that was
can be a deal breaker.
Major factor.
Sure. Okay.
And so I got a letter from Fordham University in New York.
You were Jesuit bound.
I was, sister.
Excellent. We've talked about the Jesuits a number of times and how much we owe them. So, Fordham.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
So they had a generous offer of scholarship money for me.
Wonderful.
And that was really the deciding factor. So I, Bostonian with a great love for the Boston Red Sox, was bound for the Bronx.
You do have a love for the Boston Red Sox.
I do.
As do I, sister, with my brother living right there in Boston and my father from Boston area. Mm-hmm. So we're some of the few, but we're mighty.
And we're strong.
And we are strong.
Okay. And so, yes, my love for the Red Sox grew stronger while I lived in the Bronx, but a lot of other things did too. One of the most significant experiences for me at Fordham was the retreat program. They had a Emmaus retreat program. So my sophomore year, I went on that, and it was a life-changing experience.
Oh, how beautiful.
And so through that retreat, I became more involved in campus ministry, in opportunities for service. Fordham requires 2 theology classes of all students, or it did at that time. I don't know what the requirements are now. But I took my 2 core theology classes my freshman, sophomore year. My junior year, I went on and I took a class in feminist theology.
Oh, that ought to be interesting. Your junior year, feminist theology.
Yes. And
I was going to say, what were you thinking? But we'll see.
I had a budding love for the church.
Okay.
And an interest in serving.
Okay.
And no doctrinal foundation underneath it.
Okay.
Or a very wobbly doctrinal foundation. Mm-hmm. And so our professor was a wonderful teacher and very engaging. And I fell hook, line, and sinker for all of it.
Wow. Okay.
She...
so you're not saying it was that balanced? Because you could teach feminist and teach balance.
You could.
Complementarity, John Paul II's theology of the body.
There are some theologians today writing some beautiful things about the feminine genius. And this one was not so much that way.
Okay.
We did not read Mulieris Dignitatem in that class.
Oh,
I think if we had, it might have
switched everything around.
Switched things around for me. But we did a lot of talking about supporting women's ordination.
Oh my goodness!
And, it was pretty far out there.
Okay.
And like I said, I fell for the whole thing. My second semester of my junior year, I studied in France.
Wow. Now, what degree were you pursuing at this time?
I was primarily an English major, but I continued taking French classes because I had wanted to do a semester of study abroad. Okay. And I ended up being able to turn that into a second major. So I ended up
wonderful
because of
English
my study
and
abroad.
French majors. Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so I went off to France, and I had these glorious expectations that I was just going to be in bliss. I was living right outside of Paris, and, a dream come true. And the reality of it was I was homesick, very homesick.
Really?
And very lonely. Email was not such a big thing yet at that point.
Yes.
Long-distance phone calls were very expensive. There was no such thing as cell phones. I was very lonely.
I bet so.
And I was living with a family, but I was a quasi-servant. I was an au pair part-time for them.
Oh, interesting.
And so I wasn't really treated as a guest in the home. I was more of an employee of sorts. So I wasn't part of the family.
Okay.
And because I had this part-time job, I didn't have a lot of time for a social life with my fellow students. I was really lonely.
Were you that fluent in French?
I became it. I became very fluent.
Wow.
Because children are very good language teachers.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yes. So the 9-year-old that I was caring for, she and I would do our French homework together at night because she was learning the same things in grammar class that I was learning.
Oh, my goodness.
And yes, so I learned a lot of French. And the thing that helped sustain me during my time there was my faith. So going back to that retreat experience at Fordham and my ongoing dedication to weekly Sunday Mass, beginning to explore the scriptures more. I had my Bible with me. I had some cassette mixtapes of Christian music, because I don't think there were CDs yet, or if there were, I didn't have them. So the Christian music and my Bible really were an anchor for me.
Wow,
And so during my time there, my heart really shifted, and I came to realize towards the end of the semester that God was doing great things for me and had done great things for me.
How beautiful.
And so
let me just point out to our audience that many times growing up means, probably for most of us, Sister, at some point you will go through a period of loneliness when, and somewhat hopefully so, if that's your best way of learning, that in the end it's you and God, and the necessity to really love Him on a personal level and to feel His presence personally within you. And then you realize what your faith means, and that it's not just what I have memorized, I believe, but it's the presence of another person, a divine and human person, the Blessed Trinity abiding in my soul, who will always be with me. Sister, I think that's a beautiful point. And so, again, through the cross to glory.
And so during the month of May, the last month that I was on my own over there in France, I took a visit one day down to the Cathedral of Chartres, one of the glories of the Gothic architecture in France.
Yes.
And I spent a day there on my own, and it was really one of the first times that I had been on my own and was totally happy and content during that experience in France. The cathedral is just stunning, and I could have spent days on end there. But that one day was just wonderful. And at the end of the day, Mass was being offered, just a weekday daily Mass. And I had started going to daily Mass occasionally when it was convenient with my classes in Paris. And so I thought, well, why not? I'll just catch the next train back. And so I stayed for Mass. And during Mass, the priest did not give a homily. He just left a few moments of silence for reflection. And I was just praying gratefully in my heart. And the words that came to me spontaneously, I figured out later, were Psalm 116, verse 12. What return can I make to the Lord for all you've done for me? I don't know if it was exactly that translation, but that was
how beautiful.
That was the prayer of my heart, was, Lord, how can I ever pay you back for all that you have done for me?
Wow, you were progressing spiritually.
I think so.
You really were.
And the thought that came immediately back to me, and it was not my thought, was become a nun. And I thought, no. Nobody does that anymore. Like, that was my very
goodness,
speedy response to that. And a little bit later during Mass, when I got up to go receive Holy Communion, I can still see it in my mind's eye. I turned sideways. I walked out of the row of chairs, and sitting just a few rows back were 4 sisters.
Oh, my goodness.
Wearing gray habits, fairly young, I think. And I thought, that's funny. But nobody does that anymore. And then I got back that evening to the house that I was staying at, and I had letters from 2 different friends who didn't know each other, who were on 2 different continents, both asking me, because I had been writing about what God was doing in my heart and during this time in France. And they both asked me, have you ever thought that God might be calling you to religious life?
Oh my gosh, sister, the Holy Spirit was really after you.
So you would think
Wow.
signed, sealed, delivered. It's a clear sign. Everything's all set. But I'm kind of stubborn.
Okay.
And I had my own plans for life. Marriage and children and a career, all of that was what I had started to set my mind on. And so I really dismissed all of it. I thought, no, this is a fluke. This is, just a coincidence that all of these things happened all on the same day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went back and my senior year at Fordham, people asked me, I think every single day, what are you doing after graduation? What are you doing after graduation? What are you doing after graduation? And that little thought was always there in the back of my mind, and I was always shoving it away. And I had for a long time looked at teaching high school as a career option, but I wanted to try it out sort of on a volunteer basis, on a trial basis before I got a degree in education. And the Jesuits were very enthusiastic about encouraging people to take a year of service after college. Mm-hmm. And so I started looking at the different service programs and applying to all of these programs across the United States. And I was specifically looking for a teaching experience. And none of the ones came back as teaching. Soup kitchen director, homeless shelter coordinator. And those are beautiful things, but I had a purpose in looking at the teaching. And so I kept, maybe it's not, no. A couple of weeks before graduation, my mom called, and friends of hers from her college days when she served with a religious community after she graduated from college.
Oh, my goodness.
Had written or called her and said, the Society of Our Lady, that was the group my mom had worked with.
Okay.
They have a high school down in Belize in Central America, and they need teachers this coming year. Are any of your kids in a position to go?
Oh, my gosh.
And so my mom called me, and I said,
oh, my goodness.
Where's Belize? I didn't know where Belize was, honestly. I had to go look it up on a map after talking to my mom. And I was not really keen on the idea of leaving the country again.
Oh, okay.
I thought, well, I've been there, done that. I've done the international thing. Nah. But my mom was persuasive, and she said, it can't hurt.
She is.
Just send a letter, send a resume, see what happens. So I think it was 4 days from when I faxed it down there. The principal called me.
Oh, my goodness.
And he said, okay, we've got a position for you. Are you coming?
My goodness.
And I said, what? Can I have a couple weeks to think about this? And he said, I need to know in a week.
My
And
goodness.
I said, okay, I will get back to you in a week. And so I hung up the phone, and my immediate reaction was joy.
Oh, my goodness. How
which
beautiful.
I didn't understand because I didn't want to go to Belize. I had other plans, stay in the States, be near my friends,
Wow.
And so then I thought, okay, well, let me be rational about this. I'm going to write a list. Reasons to go to Belize.
Good for you.
Reasons
Good.
not to
Use
go to
your
Belize.
mind. Okay.
Yeah. Reasons to go to Belize, reasons not to go to Belize. And my friend came in, and she saw what I was doing, and she said, you're an idiot. There's no reason not to go to Belize. You should go to Belize.
Really?
Yes. Because my reasons for not going were not very good.
Kind of selfish.
Pretty much. Okay. So I went to Belize. End of the summer after I graduated from college, I found myself on a plane heading to a very, very humid subtropical climate.
Wow.
Really not sure what I was getting myself into, but, just ready for the adventure. In the meantime, they had asked me not only to teach English, but also French. So I was armed with a couple of French books because they didn't have any French resources.
Oh, my goodness.
Little school down there. And we arrived, and we got to the mission, and we were a tiny little village.
And they speak what language?
English is the official language of the country, but we were a mile away from the Guatemalan border. And so many of the locals were Spanish speaking. Mass was offered at least half of the time in Spanish.
Now, you've mentioned French, but you've not mentioned Spanish.
I speak some Spanish. My best Spanish is actually church Spanish. I can understand the Mass, the scriptures pretty well because it's similar to the French and because I would go to Mass daily in Belize.
But you went there without
I didn't have any
any knowledge of Spanish.
No. Maybe hola.
To teach English and French in a Spanish-speaking area.
Yes.
How interesting.
So we arrived there, and I cannot to this day remember if it was the principal or the pastor who said this to us when we got there. But he said to us, as by way of orientation, welcome to our mission, Mount Carmel High School. Here we teach the magisterium of the church. And that term was not familiar to me. And I remember wondering to myself, I wonder what that is.
Oh, my goodness, sister.
That's really what I mean when I say I had a very shaky doctrinal foundation. I didn't have a vocabulary to talk about the teachings of the faith. I didn't know what the teachings of the faith were. And so Belize was a total immersion experience for me to learn the faith because the missionaries, the priests who were running the mission and the deacon and the sisters who were there, they were not only evangelizing the people of the town, and they had been in this town for 30 years at this point.
God bless them.
But there was about 20, 25 of us, American and Canadian college graduate volunteers who were running this high school for them. They were evangelizing us too.
Beautiful.
And I think one of the really special graces I received my first year there, because I ended up spending 2 years, but one of the really special graces I received was to be something of a sponge and just start absorbing. My typical reaction when I didn't like things was to argue back, to shout back, to fight back. That was certainly what I had picked up in the Bronx. You don't agree, then start yelling at people.
Sure.
But I was, many of the volunteers that year were from Minnesota. And there's really something very genuine about that Minnesota niceness that you've heard of.
Oh, how beautiful.
And I really thought a lot of them were phonies for a few weeks. I was like, when are they going to just drop this phony, smiley, nice? Because I kind of the East Coast crust, I was but I started to realize, no, these are genuine, kind people, So the grace to just kind of sit back and listen and not instantly argue back every time. Because my fellow volunteers, I had a great deal of respect for them, and they didn't seem to have any problems with these church teachings that were being preached to us.
Amazing.
And so really I started to go through this interior struggle because as I learned what the church actually teaches, because that's what I was learning through the homilies and just living a very communal life with the other volunteers. There was definitely a community spirit.
So it was totally different from your experience in France.
Very much.
Because now you have a close community who are living the faith.
I lived in a house with 7 or 8 other women.
Beautiful.
And then all of our meals were taken together at the rectory, so we had community meals.
That is an excellent mission you were on.
It was. And we had, there was one night a week that we were all required to be together at dinner at a particular time.
It was getting you ready for your vocation.
It was, sister. It really was. And so the interior struggle that I really started to go through was what I have called faith, like my Catholic faith that I've had my whole life, isn't real if I'm going to go the cafeteria road and pick and choose only the things that I like, only the things that I understand, only the things I agree with.
Sister, let me just pause a minute to say to our audience, Sister used a term, you may have heard it before, you may not have, but it's very telling, and it pinpoints something that a lot of people do who, as Sister is saying, your Catholic faith on occasion, some people view it as cafeteria style, Sister's phrase, which is used, meaning I can go through the lineup of the church, so to speak, and I can pick and choose what I want. Whereas that is not the Catholic faith. The Catholic faith is a totality. And if you're not thinking with the mind of the church, the question is, are you really that, quote, Catholic? And so I think the goal of our listeners and the goal of every Catholic and the goal of ourselves, even in our own religious vocations and every family, should certainly be, as Sister's pointing out, I need to know it more. And if I don't understand and I have difficulty with this particular teaching, I need to ask someone who can enlighten me, because the church is not wrong. I just don't know enough. And none of us knows enough. And so it's a lifelong experience. But don't be a cafeteria Catholic saying, I want this and this, but none of that, none of that. Oh, no, I disagree with that. No, I'll go over in this lane and pick up a couple more little things. But of course, I'm Catholic. How are you something you do not know and you do not accept? And with the faith, it literally means I embrace it all, whether I understand it, because I have limited understanding abilities and limited knowledge and limited intellect this side of eternity. And but in faith, I reach out and embrace it all, and it is who I am. Thank you, Sister, for bringing that up.
You're welcome, Sister.
So at this point, you decided against your cafeteria Catholicity.
I did, but it was a struggle. And I would say that, as I said before, grace works.
Yes.
And I was attending daily Mass almost every day.
Oh, well, yes.
My fellow missionaries, we would often go for a walk at the end of the school day and, just get out of town for a little while. And somebody would often say, do you want to pray a rosary?
Oh,
and,
how beautiful.
And honestly, in the beginning, I didn't really know how.
Oh.
And so I would always say, sure, you want to lead it?
How old were you at this point in time?
College graduate, Sister.
Okay.
But, and the rosary was around growing up. I mean, I got one for my first Holy Communion, and whenever we had a death in the family, we would pray it at the wake. But it wasn't a part of my life.
Okay.
And so, but that had also become a pretty frequent, if not daily occurrence, that I was praying the rosary. Some of the teachers had asked if the priest could expose the Blessed Sacrament for adoration on a regular basis. Wow. So we also started to have adoration. And so
God put you in the right place.
Yes. And none of that was required, but it made sense. And because my relationship with God was continuing to grow, I wanted to spend time with him. And so the gift that I think he really gave me to keep me in the church, like he gave me a gift so that I wouldn't run away from him, was a belief, an unshakable belief in the real presence.
Oh, how beautiful.
And I remember kneeling in the church there before the tabernacle and just really asking the Lord, where do I go?
Wow.
Because your real presence is only in the Catholic Church. The Episcopalians think they have you, but you don't. It's not the real presence because they've lost, the apostolic succession, which I had learned about at this point.
Wonderful.
Most of the other Protestant denominations don't see the importance of the Eucharist. The Orthodox have the real presence, but Lord, I'm not Greek. I'm not Russian. I mean, where do I go? That was my question. Where do I go and still have you? And I knew the answer was nowhere. It's here. You've got to stay in the church. So then the question became to surrender. What I had cobbled together as what I called my faith, and which was really about me, and to surrender that and to accept the faith as it's been handed down to us.
Beautiful.
Which is about God. And so, and I don't know the exact moment when that turn happened for me, but somewhere in the course of that first year in Belize, it did. And I loved my time there. And so as the principal was kind of encouraging us, you don't have to just stay for a year. So I looked around and I thought, well, I'll come back for a second year. And so I did. And it was in the second year that the question of vocation started to come up very strongly.
How interesting.
And that was when I really started to kind of battle against it. Because I had surrendered, okay, Lord, I'm all in. I belong to your church. I'm going to accept what your church teaches. I'm going to pray the rosary. I'm going to go to Mass as much as I can. I'm going to learn about the saints, all of these new things to learn and grow through. But then I started to notice that there were some sisters from the Society of Our Lady at the Guatemalan mission on the other side of the border. And, we would go back and forth to the other side and we'd see the sisters. And I would notice myself drawn to watching them.
Interesting.
And I would just think they were so fast. No, I'm not fascinated by them. No. No, there's some really cute guys over here, Lord. And I'm fascinated by them. And I want to get married. And I want to have children. And, I'll have all the children you want me to have, Lord, because at this point I had also learned about the church's teaching on NFP, and all of my children can go in the convent, Lord, in the seminary, but not me, because I'm not ready to surrender that yet. So the real turning point in that came with an invitation to make the total consecration to Jesus through Mary, St. Louis de Montfort.
Beautiful.
They had invited the teachers my first year, and I kind of dismissed it. I really didn't understand why you would do such a thing. In my second year, in November, the invitation went out again, and I thought, well, it can't hurt, might help, why not? And the priest told us that, once you make this consecration, your lives will never be the same. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, I could make this consecration. I could give this, and then I could still do what I want with my life.
Pussyfooting right into the door.
I did. So we went through the 33 days of preparation.
Beautiful.
And we made the consecration on the Immaculate Conception.
Oh, beautiful.
And I remember kneeling in the church, and we made a big deal about it. We all went up to the altar to sign our consecrations. And I remember kneeling there in the church and just praying. And this time, the call to my vocation came very strongly from Our Lady. And it wasn't an audible voice, but the thought, the words, the idea that came to me was, you are to be a bride of Christ.
Wow. That is pretty strong.
Yeah. And I was still stubborn. And at that point, I still said no. And at this point, I said, okay, well, I don't want to do what God wants me to do. So I don't really have a right to ask anything of him anymore. Because that's, to my mind, that was still primarily what prayer was asking God for what you want. So I decided, well, I'll just stop praying.
Oh, my goodness.
So I did. For 2 months, I kind of gave the Lord the silent treatment. I would go to Mass.
Well, you were a hard one for him to catch.
Sister, I'm praying that someday he's going to turn my stubbornness into final and holy perseverance. I
think the two are related.
The miracle.
It's just how you use the same quality of strong-willed decision.
Yes. And so 2 months or so, I just gave up prayer and found myself more miserable than I had ever been in my life. So I got some news from home from a college friend about a tragedy that had taken place. And still at this point, email was still pretty primitive, and there wasn't really anything I could do for my friend. And so I said, well, I'm going to pray a rosary. Tell her that I'm going to pray a rosary for her and her family tonight. So I did, and I, my rosary had been hanging on the wall in my room. I wasn't even carrying it around with me, and so I got down on my knees that night and I prayed the rosary. And I remember, and I actually wrote this down that night, so I have it clearly. I remember telling the Lord at the beginning, this rosary is not about me, it's about my friend. So just, I'm praying for her. But in the course of praying that rosary, the walls that I had been building really solidly for 2 months, but for a couple of years before that, they began to melt.
Good.
And at the end of the rosary, I said to the Lord, okay, Lord, I'm going to think about it.
Oh, goodness. Well, Sister, how did you find our community?
I found our community through a wonderful Dominican friar, Father James Sullivan.
Beautiful.
The Lord sent him to...
Thank you, Dominican friars out there. That's for sure.
The Lord sent him to my home parish in Massachusetts to celebrate Mass on a Saturday evening in Advent in the Jubilee year of 2000.
Beautiful.
And I went to talk to him after Mass because I just wanted to meet him and thank him because he had celebrated a beautiful Mass. And he asked me what I was, was I married? And I said, no, I'm looking for a religious community. And, we kept on talking for a while. And then all of a sudden he interrupted himself and he said, wait, I've got it. I know where you're going. And I said, okay, Father, prophesy. And he said, the Dominican Sisters of Mary, Mother of the Eucharist in Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Oh.
And then I had never heard the title Mary, Mother of the Eucharist before. And because my whole process of discernment had been so closely related to the Eucharist and to the Blessed Mother,
yes,
it just went right to my heart. And I said, I think that might be it, Father. So he put me in touch with you, Sister.
We owe him a lot of prayers,
and I emailed
Sister.
you, and bada bing, bada boom.
Sister Maria Guadalupe, thank you so much for telling us an incredible story. As we began saying, each story is totally God's grace for the unique individuals that He's created each one of us to be. And your story, Sister, is fascinating through so many ups and downs and ins and outs. But what I also really appreciate for the audience to understand is that not every vocation finds the girl just flinging herself totally before the Blessed Sacrament, so to speak. That there are legitimate questions, and that there can sometimes be a bit longer road. But at the same time, if the young woman or the young man or the couple even, perhaps they're pursuing a possible marriage, if they pursue in prayer, if they're persevering in prayer, and they pursue God's will, even when they don't think that they are, but there's still that little nick in the armor that God can get through. And they don't just turn Him off or run away scared,
Right.
but they continue to pursue. Sister, I can't thank God enough that He continued to pursue you, because you are a beautiful gift to our community.
Thank you, Sister.
I know our audience, as well as I, certainly thank you very much for being with us today. And may God give you many young women like yourself to try to straighten out and put on the straight and narrow and love into the fullness of the goodness He has created in them too.
Amen,
Thank you,
Sister.
Sister.
Thank you.
So if you like the material on this particular podcast, then please click on the next podcast for another fascinating story.